Welcome to HOA Legends, where every neighborhood rules has story waiting to be told.
The ambulance horn kept blaring behind my car, loud and impatient, but the gate in front of me didn't move an inch. I pressed the remote again, harder this time, like force could make a difference. Nothing happened. The tall metal bars stood firm, blocking the only exit from our neighborhood. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. In the passenger seat, my mother leaned back, clutching her chest, struggling to breathe. "Please hurry," she whispered weakly. I jumped out of the car and ran to the keypad beside the gate. I punched in my code. The small screen flashed back at me, "Access disabled during lock hours." My stomach dropped. 2 days ago, the HOA had sent out a notice. A new rule. The gate would automatically lock from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. No manual opening. No exceptions. They called it a security upgrade. At the meeting, everyone nodded along. Nobody thought about emergencies. Nobody imagined this situation. The paramedic rushed toward me. "Why aren't we moving? The gate is locked," I shouted. "It won't open at night." He stared at the barrier in disbelief, then looked back at my car where my mother was gasping for air. The ambulance engine hummed behind us, waiting. Time felt like it was slipping through my fingers. He grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, we're unable to exit the community. Gate is electronically locked. Patient condition critical." Porch lights flicked on along the street. Neighbors stepped outside in pajamas and jackets, confused by the noise. A few of them walked closer, watching silently. Someone muttered, "Is this because of the new HOA rule?" I felt anger rising inside me. That rule suddenly didn't feel like safety. It felt like a trap. My mother coughed sharply from the car. I ran back to her. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow and uneven. The paramedic followed and quickly checked her pulse. "We don't have time," he said firmly. "We need to get her to the hospital now." "But the gate." He looked back at the metal bars, then at me. "We may have to force it?" My mind raced. Damaging HOA property? The fines? The letters? The threats? Then I looked at my mother again, fighting for air. "Do it," I said without hesitation. The paramedic signaled to the driver. The ambulance reversed a little, preparing to ram the gate. Just then, headlights appeared down the street. A black SUV pulled up quickly. The HOA president stepped out, shouting loudly as he ran toward us. "Stop! Don't you dare touch that gate!" The HOA president hurried toward us, waving his arms like we were the problem. He didn't even glance at my mother inside the car. His eyes were fixed on the gate and the ambulance. "Stop right there," he shouted at the driver. "You cannot damage community property." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. "My mother can't breathe. We need to get out." He pointed toward the keypad. "The gate locks automatically after 9. Everyone was informed. "There are procedures." "Procedures?" the paramedic snapped. "Sir, this is a medical emergency." The president's voice stayed calm, almost rehearsed. "You'll have to wait. I can contact the security company. They handle overrides." "How long will that take?" I asked. He hesitated. "They usually respond within 30 to 40 minutes. I felt like the ground shifted under me. 30 minutes felt like a lifetime. My mother let out a weak groan from the passenger seat. The paramedic moved quickly back to her, checking her oxygen level. "She doesn't have 30 minutes, he said sharply. The neighbors were closer now, whispering among themselves. Some of them looked angry. Others looked uncomfortable. A woman from across the street spoke up, "Isn't there a master key or something?" The president shook his head. "Not after the new system upgrade." It's fully automated for security reasons. I couldn't control myself anymore. Security from what? We're trapped inside. He frowned at me like I was being unreasonable. Please calm down. We can't just break the gate every time someone panics. The paramedic stood up straight and faced him. Sir, if you don't move out of the way, we will break it. This is now interfering with emergency response. The president crossed his arms. And you'll be responsible for the damage costs. Something inside me snapped. Send me the bill. Just move. But he didn't move. He stood there, guarding the gate like it was more important than the life sitting in my car. My mother coughed again, weaker this time. I could hear the strain in her breathing even from where I stood. The paramedic looked at me, then at the driver, silently asking for confirmation. Before I could answer, another neighbor stepped forward. Mr. Lawson, who rarely spoke at HOA meetings, raised his voice. This is insane. Open the gate or let them break it. More voices joined in. Yeah, let them through. This is wrong. The president looked around, clearly uncomfortable as the crowd grew. But he still didn't step aside. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling the security company right now. The paramedic checked his watch and shook his head. We don't have that kind of time. He turned to the driver and gave a firm nod. The ambulance engine roared louder as it began to reverse again, preparing to ram the gate. The HOA president suddenly stepped directly in front of it, spreading his arms. You are not breaking this gate. For a second, nobody moved. The ambulance idled loudly, headlights washing over the HOA president as he stood planted in front of the gate, arms stretched wide like he was protecting something sacred. The paramedic jumped down from the back and rushed toward him. Sir, you need to step aside. Now. I will not, the president replied, breathing hard but refusing to move. You can't destroy community property. There are legal procedures. I couldn't believe this was real. My mother's faint wheezing filled the night air behind me. Each breath sounded weaker than the last. I ran back to the car and held her hand. Stay with me, Mom. Please. The neighbors were no longer whispering. They were speaking loudly now. This is going too far. Let the ambulance through. What kind of rule is this? Mr. Lawson walked right up to the president. You're out of your mind. Move. The president snapped back, this is for everyone's safety. If we allow this once, people will demand it every time. The paramedic's patience broke. Sir, if you don't step away, you are actively obstructing emergency medical care. That has consequences. The word consequences hung in the air. Still, the president didn't move. Another neighbor pulled out his phone. I'm recording this. A woman added, I'm calling 911 again. They need to hear this. I looked around and realized something had shifted. The crowd wasn't passive anymore. People were angry. Not confused. Not unsure. Angry. The paramedic went back to the ambulance and spoke quickly to the driver. Then he returned to me. We're taking her out on the stretcher. We'll go on foot if we have to. What? I asked. We can't wait. They carefully lifted my mother onto the stretcher. Her eyes were half closed now, her grip weak. Watching them wheel her toward the gate made my chest feel tight. The gate stood tall and unyielding. The paramedic turned to the president one last time. Move. No. That's when Mr. Lawson and two other neighbors stepped forward together. Without asking, without arguing, they grabbed the president by the arms and pulled him aside. Enough. Mr. Lawson shouted. The path to the gate was clear. The paramedic signaled the driver. The ambulance reversed a short distance, then surged forward. The metal crash echoed through the street as the front bumper slammed into the gate. The bars bent inward with a horrible screeching sound. On the second hit, the lock snapped. The gate swung crookedly open. Nobody cheered. Nobody spoke. They rushed the stretcher through the opening and into the ambulance. I jumped into the back just as the doors slammed shut. As we drove away, I looked back through the rear window. The HOA president stood beside the broken gate, staring at it in disbelief while the neighbors stared at him. And for the first time, he looked small. The ambulance ride felt endless even though the hospital was only 15 minutes away. I sat beside my mother, holding her hand while the paramedic worked quickly, adjusting oxygen, checking her pulse, speaking into his radio with calm urgency. I tried to read his face for reassurance, but all I saw was focus. "Stay with me, Mom," I whispered again and again. Her eyes barely opened. She nodded faintly, but she looked exhausted, like her body was giving up the fight. When we finally reached the emergency entrance, the doors burst open and hospital staff rushed in. They wheeled her away without a word. One nurse gently stopped me from following. "You'll have to wait here." And just like that, I was alone. I sank into a plastic chair in the waiting room, my hands still shaking. My mind replayed the scene at the gate over and over. The president's voice. The metal crashing. The neighbors shouting. It all felt unreal, like something I had watched on television instead of lived through. 10 minutes later, my phone started vibrating non-stop. Messages. Calls. Notifications. I looked down and saw our neighborhood group chat exploding with activity. I can't believe what just happened. I recorded everything. This is insane. He literally blocked an ambulance. Then a video thumbnail appeared in the chat. Someone had already uploaded a clip. It showed the HOA president standing in front of the ambulance with his arms out. You could clearly hear the paramedic warning him. You could clearly hear my mother coughing in the background. My stomach twisted. Another message popped up. "This is going on Facebook." Then another. "I'm sending this to the news." I stared at the screen, realizing this wasn't staying inside our neighborhood. This wasn't going to be handled quietly with HOA emails and warning letters. This was public now. A nurse finally approached me. My heart jumped into my throat. "She's stable," she said gently. "It was a severe cardiac episode. You brought her in just in time." Just in time. If we had waited 30 minutes for the security company to answer, she wouldn't have made it. Relief washed over me so hard I felt dizzy. I covered my face with my hands and let out a shaky breath I didn't know I was holding. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a neighbor. It was a local news reporter asking if I would be willing to talk about what happened at the gated community tonight. I looked at the message for a long time. Then I typed one word back. By morning, the video was everywhere. I hadn't slept. I stayed in the hospital chair beside my mother's bed, watching the clip replay on my phone over and over like it was some kind of nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every time, it felt worse. The camera angle was clear. The sound was clear. The HOA president's voice was calm, almost annoyed, while the paramedic's voice grew more urgent with each second. You could hear my mother struggling to breathe in the background. That was the part that made people furious. When I opened social media, the clip had already been shared thousands of times. Comments poured in faster than I could read them. "This is illegal. He should be arrested. Who locks people inside a neighborhood? This is insane HOA abuse." News pages had reposted it. Local blogs picked it up. By mid-morning, a regional news channel had run the story with the headline, "HOA president blocks ambulance over gate rule." My phone rang again. The same reporter from last night. "People are outraged," she told me. "We want to air your side of the story tonight." I hesitated for a moment. I didn't like attention. I didn't want to be the face of anything. But then I thought about what could have happened if the neighbors hadn't stepped in. If the ambulance hadn't broken the gate. If this can stop it from happening to someone else, I said, I'll talk. Back in the neighborhood, things were falling apart. The group chat had turned into chaos. Some residents were apologizing to me. Others were demanding an emergency HOA meeting. A few people who had supported the gate rule earlier were now completely silent. Then someone posted a screenshot. It was an email from the HOA president sent just minutes ago. Subject: community property damage. He was demanding that I pay for the repair of the gate. I read it twice to make sure I understood correctly. He wasn't apologizing. He wasn't explaining. He was billing me. That's when anger replaced the shock I'd been feeling since last night. I forwarded the email to the reporter without saying a word. Within an hour, she texted back. This just made the story 10 times bigger. Later that afternoon, I received another call. This one wasn't from the news. It was from the city's legal department. A calm voice on the line said, "We need to ask you some questions about last night's incident involving emergency access obstruction." I sat up straighter. This wasn't just neighborhood drama anymore. This had become a legal issue. And for the first time since the gate slammed shut in front of me, I realized something important. The HOA president had made a mistake he couldn't fix with a warning letter. The call from the city's legal department lasted nearly 40 minutes. They asked me to describe everything from the moment I reached the gate to the moment the ambulance broke through. They already had the video. They already had statements from the paramedics. What they wanted from me were the small details. The tone of his voice. The words he used. How long my mother had been struggling before we got out. I answered everything carefully. At one point, the woman on the phone paused and said, "Just to confirm, he physically stood in front of the ambulance after being warned this was a medical emergency." "Yes," I said. "Multiple times." She sighed quietly. "Thank you. That's very important." Important. After the call ended, I sat there staring at the wall. I had never spoken to city officials before. I had never been involved in anything that felt this serious. This wasn't about HOA rules anymore. This was about whether someone had broken the law. Back in the neighborhood, another message spread through the group chat. A notice for an emergency HOA meeting scheduled for that evening at the clubhouse. Attendance strongly encouraged. People were no longer asking questions. They were demanding answers. Mr. Lawson messaged me privately. "You don't have to come if you don't want to. But people are angry. Very angry." I decided I would go. That evening, when I walked into the clubhouse, it was packed. Chairs were filled. People stood along the walls. Conversation stopped the moment I stepped inside. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. I had lived in that neighborhood for 5 years. I had never seen it like this. The HOA president sat at the front table with the rest of the board members. But he didn't look the same. His posture was stiff. His expression tight. He avoided eye contact. The meeting started, but no one waited for formalities. A man in the back stood up and shouted, "Why was there no emergency override?" A woman added, "Who approved this system?" Another voice, "You could have killed someone." The president tried to speak calmly. "We followed standard security protocols." "Security," someone yelled. "From what?" "Our own neighbors." The room erupted into shouting. He banged the table for order. "Please. Let me explain." But no one wanted an explanation anymore. They wanted accountability. And for the first time, the man who used to control every meeting with confidence looked completely overwhelmed. The shouting didn't stop for nearly 10 minutes. Every time the HOA president tried to speak, someone cut him off. People who had never raised their voices at meetings were standing now, demanding answers. A woman near the front said, "My kids play outside at night sometimes. What if this happened to us?" Another man added, "You made a rule without thinking about real life." The president kept repeating the same line. "We acted in the best interest of community safety." But the words sounded empty now. Mr. Lawson stood up from the second row. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He spoke calmly, and somehow that made the room go quiet. "This isn't about the gate anymore," he said. "This is about judgment. And trust. And whether the person in charge of our community can tell the difference between rules and common sense." No one interrupted him. He continued, "Last night, we all saw what happens when rules matter more than people." A murmur of agreement moved through the crowd. One of the board members leaned toward the president and whispered something. The president shook his head slightly, but he looked nervous now. Very nervous. Then Mr. Lawson said the words no one had expected to hear. "I'm calling for a vote to remove the HOA president from his position." The room went completely silent. Even I felt a shock run through me. I had never seen anything like this happen. The president's face went pale. "You can't just do that," he said quickly. "There are procedures." "Then let's follow them," Mr. Lawson replied. "Right now." Another board member stood up. "He's right. The bylaws allow for an emergency vote if the majority of residents demand it." Hands began to rise. First a few. Then more. Then nearly the entire room. I looked around and realized something powerful. These were the same neighbors who had quietly accepted every rule for years. The same people who nodded along at meetings without asking questions. Now they weren't quiet at all. The president looked around at the raised hands like he didn't recognize anyone anymore. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "You're overreacting." A woman near the back spoke up. "My husband was one of the people who helped pull you away from the ambulance." "We're not overreacting." The board member at the table nodded. "We will proceed with the vote." It happened right there, in that crowded clubhouse, without delay. And when the count was finished, the result was undeniable. The HOA president was removed from his position. He sat there in stunned silence while people began talking again, louder than before. Some looked relieved. Others looked angry. But no one looked uncertain. As he stood up to leave, he glanced at me for the first time that night. There was no apology in his eyes. Only disbelief. The morning after the vote felt strangely quiet. No emails from the HOA. No notices. No reminders about trash bins or lawn height. For the first time in years, the neighborhood inbox was silent. But outside the gates, things were anything but quiet. The news segment aired that night. They showed the video. They showed the broken gate. They showed the part where the paramedic warned him to step aside. Then they showed my short interview outside the hospital. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. The footage spoke louder than anything I could add. By sunrise, the story had spread far beyond our town. Then the official letter arrived. Not from the HOA. From the city. It stated that an investigation had begun into possible obstruction of emergency services and negligence related to restricted access within a residential area. It also mentioned something else, the legality of automated gate systems without emergency override features. I read that line twice. This wasn't just about one man anymore. This was about the rule itself. Around noon, I heard a knock on my door. It was Mr. Lawson. "You'll want to hear this," he said. We walked down to the gate together. A city vehicle was parked outside. Two officials stood there examining the damaged metal bars and the keypad system. One of them was taking pictures. The other was speaking with a new board member who looked visibly uncomfortable. I stood a little distance away, listening. "This system violates emergency access standards," one official said. "There must always be a manual override." Mr. Lawson looked at me. So the rule was illegal. Looks like it, he replied. Later that afternoon, another message spread through the neighborhood. The former HOA president had received a formal notice to appear for questioning regarding interference with emergency response. Word spread quickly. Some people were shocked. Others said it was deserved. No one defended him anymore. As for the gate, workers arrived before evening. They didn't repair it. They removed the entire automated lock system. Watching them dismantle it felt symbolic. Like the neighborhood was quietly undoing something bigger than metal and wires. For the first time since that night, I felt something close to relief. Not because of revenge, but because it meant this would never happen to anyone else here again. A week later, the neighborhood felt different. Not quieter. Not louder. Just changed. People greeted each other more often. Conversations that used to be small talk now lasted longer. It was as if something invisible had been lifted. The gate still stood at the entrance, but without the automated lock system, it looked less intimidating. Less like a barrier. More like a simple part of the street. My mother was back home, recovering slowly. The doctors said if we had arrived even 20 minutes later, things could have turned out very differently. Every time I thought about that, a chill ran through me. One evening, I walked outside and found a small group of neighbors gathered near the sidewalk. They waved me over. Someone handed me a plate of homemade food. Another thanked me for speaking to the news. A third said, "You did what the rest of us should have done a long time ago, question things." I didn't feel like I had done anything brave. I had just been scared and desperate. But somehow, that night had forced everyone to look at something they had ignored for years. A new HOA board had been formed quickly. Their first official action was sending out a community-wide message. All safety systems will now include emergency overrides. Resident welfare comes before policy. Reading that line felt strange. Simple. Obvious. Yet it had taken a crisis for it to be written down. A few days later, I saw the former president walking toward his car. He didn't live far from me. He looked tired, smaller somehow. For a moment, I wondered if he would say something. Apologize. Explain. He didn't. He got into his car and drove away without looking up. And I realized something important. This was never about one man being cruel. It was about what happens when people stop questioning authority and start accepting rules without thinking about the real lives behind them. That night at the gate had exposed more than a bad decision. It had exposed a mindset. Now, every time I pass through the entrance of our neighborhood, I don't see metal bars anymore. I see a reminder. A reminder that safety isn't created by locking people in. It's created by making sure they can always get out when they need to.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoy it, please subscribe to my channel, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in comments. Your support means the world to me.